Ooh, hey, how's it going? How's it going, everybody? Back again to review the second episode of season one of Breaking Bad, the Cats in the Bag. And to tell you the truth, this is absolutely one of my favorite episodes in the entirety of Breaking Bad. It absolutely is. Like they talked about a little bit yesterday, season one has a pretty special place in my heart in terms of viewing this show. And to kind of steal a line that Michael Mandow used to describe his only three episodes in season six of Better Call Saul as operatic. I kind of view it that way after my maybe 15th, 16th watch of these first three episodes here. And I just absolutely love this one. My superlatives would run out if I really just truly said how I felt about this episode. But yeah, how's it going, everyone? How's it going, Stone Yoda, Matt D, Roy Tamargo, Paul Sura? How's it going? Not the biggest fan of Skylar White, but it's all good. How's it going at Bube, Washer, Visser, Ham? Again, still working on that name for sure. What is up at ADHD Whiskey? So hey, how's it going? That's true. I guess that's true. It could be a dream sequence, I suppose. I guess it could be a dream sequence at ADHD Whiskey, but that is a conversation for a different video. But yeah, like I said, there's really no structure here in respect to how often I'm going to do these. I had some time today, so I thought I would do it. I was actually looking over some of the comments I had, and people were wondering if this was going to be a one-a-week type thing. But with 62 episodes of this series, that would take over a year, so it's definitely going to be more than one a week, that's for sure. Again, it's going to be pretty, um, you know, kind of laissez-faire in respect to how often I do these. But again, like I said, I'm really excited to talk about one of my favorite episodes of all time in this universe. I never get tired about talking about this universe. And yeah, just like I said, I truly find these first three episodes to just be absolutely unbelievable. The story here that's presented to us, where it continues to just display to us more of the backstory of who exactly is this man, Walter White, that we're meeting at the very beginning of this series. We learn a little bit more about his family dynamic. We learn how he and his partner, Jesse Pinkman, deal with truly cleaning up the very first mess that they ever have to clean up as a true partnership, as part of this tandem that we see over the course of this series. And actually, when I was going back and rewatching this episode for, like I said, the 15th, 16th time probably, I truly found myself thinking back again. It's sort of 6 degrees of separation to that speech that Saul Goodman gave in the finale entitled Saul Gone, where he says that without me, Walter White would have been dead or within jail inside of a month. And I truly sort of feel the same way in respect to these two characters here. It truly was a partnership where they truly couldn't exist without one another, where if Walt didn't have Jesse, he would truly, like Saul said, likely be dead or in prison within a month. There was no way he would have any real sense on where to begin in respect to dealing this methamphetamine that he was creating. I go back to that great piece of dialogue in season one, a little bit further down the line, in the episode entitled Crazy Handful of Nothing, where Jesse says to him, you may know a lot about chemistry, but you don't know jack about slinging crystal. And it was absolutely true at the time. Walter White was absolutely in over his head, but at the same time, while Jesse probably wouldn't be in this situation to begin with without someone like Walter White, without Walter White and his intellect guiding Jesse Pinkman, his just very irrational decision-making and his very impulsive decision-making that we see on full display in this episode would have likely been the undoing of Jesse Pinkman, absolutely, in my opinion. Yeah, it's a great point at Pulsar. I think she definitely could have appeared. I mean, she could have also been a family member that was present in the court along with Walter Jr. Again, why the creators decided not to do that, maybe because they wanted to focus more directly on Marie and didn't want these secondary characters to be more of a distraction, because if they were there other than just us seeing them, you would imagine that the creators would want them to have a very consequential role in the story outside of just being a physical presence there that kind of takes away just by nature of the fact that these are two very crucial characters from the plot of Breaking Bad that are being interjected in the plot of Better Call Saul. But yeah, it's definitely something I thought about for sure in respect to maybe Walter Jr. and Skylar could have appeared in that court appearance, absolutely. Just based on my reading of their family dynamic, it was a very close-knit family, and while I think technically it was an extended family by the definition, it almost just seemed like a true just family dynamic there. It seemed like an immediate family. There's that great scene when they're visiting Hank in the ICU, where the police or the medic, if I'm not mistaken, says, immediate family only, and Marie says, they are family. So despite the fact that they're not technically immediate family. So yeah, kind of a great point you raised there at Pulsura. But kind of getting back to this episode here. So yeah, like I talked a little bit about yesterday, following the direct continuation during the cold opening scene of this episode of Walt following him having sex with Skylar here, following him returning back from what we saw transpire at the end of the previous episode when he killed, or thought to have killed, Crazy 8 as well as Emilio, excuse me. But yeah, following this direct continuation here, we then see the tagline underneath the "What is up, Justin Cruz?" We see the tagline following it, panning to this scene here of 12 hours previous. And like I talked a little bit about yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that this is the final time that we see a written piece of information displayed to us. Again, it'll be very hard to find the exact timestamp here without playing it. I don't want to get, I could maybe play a second of it. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, we see the very sort of brief sort of timestamps here of 12 hours earlier. And like I talked a little bit about yesterday, this is the very last time when letters are written out to specifically indicate to us a direct period of time when the timeline was being manipulated. And like I kind of alluded to yesterday, I think, as Vince Gilligan has stated on the Insider podcast for Better Call Saul, and likely in other places as well, he would much rather the audience put the puzzle pieces together themselves rather than it being spoon-fed to them. But yes, with this being a brand new series, and with I guess I don't know, maybe the just the nature of network television. Again, at the same time, Vince Gilligan did talk about how AMC really let them have the free reins in respect to being very coy and not being so overt with the story. I remember he talked back about that scene all the way back in season 1 of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Uno, where we can see Jimmy and Kim smoking the cigarette, and we see that Kim's face is really distorted there. And Vince Gilligan sort of alluded to the fact that a traditional, maybe television executive would have wanted it to not be so subtle. You want a clear shot of this character's face. You want it to be revealed right away who this character is. But that kind of goes against the sort of natural instincts of Vince Gilligan's at least what he believes to be tendencies in respect to good storytelling, where you want there to be mystery, because if you tell everyone everything in the very first episode, then why bother watching episode number 2? So kind of, again, that really kind of goes to the fact that I was, like I said, I was rewatching this episode here, and one of my favorite parts of this episode is just the dialogue in this episode. Just unbelievable writing here. I mean, I know Vince Gilligan doesn't need me to toot his own horn here, but just some of the way the dialogue is written, and the way that it is directed, and the way that the actors deliver on the lines are just unbelievable here. I mean, I don't want to spend my time just rehashing all of the dialogue, but my goodness, I am just blown away by all of the dialogue over the course of this episode. It's just unbelievable here. And I know that's kind of why I wish they would talk a little bit more about the writing on the Insider podcast. But again, as is the nature of that podcast, it's more about the complete production of an episode of this universe, and not just about the writing. And I definitely understand why the writers want to give props to all of these sort of positions that don't get as much credit. To use kind of a football analogy, I feel like the writers are kind of like the skilled positions, like the quarterback and the wide receiver, who kind of get all the praise because they're throwing and catching the touchdowns. And all of these sort of other aspects here are a little bit more of the offensive line, if you will, who definitely don't get enough credit. And so yeah, to kind of use a football analogy here. But I'm doing great, Almia's Army. I had a great day. I hope you had a great day as well. But yeah, unbelievable scene here where, like I talked about a little bit earlier, we really get to see the partnership of Walter White and Jesse Pinkman cleaning up truly the first mess that they ever clean up in the entire series of Breaking Bad, following, this situation here where they have to deal with the threats of Crazy 8 and Emilio. And an unbelievable scene here where they apparently get this, likely man who lives on this, Indian reservation, as they say over the course of this series that they're cooking on. And Walter White telling an absolute fabrication here, a total lie to justify why he's not wearing any pants and why he drove into that ditch. Of course, not wanting to say the true story to this man. This man, unbeknownst to him, is aiding and abetting a criminal here. I mean, maybe he does know and maybe looks the other way. An unbelievable scene when Jesse hands him the soaked $40 that was soaked in some sort of liquid, likely from all of the broken containers that are involved in making methamphetamine. And of course, when Walt sees his this man's sort of reaction to this, sort of in a quasi bribe, hands him probably around $200 in $20 bills, and he seems very satisfied with this. And like Walt said, we really couldn't be more grateful. And it's kind of funny, when I was watching this scene here, I was really sort of juxtaposing it to how Walt and Jesse obviously get much better at cleaning up these messes over the course of this series, because sort of a detail that's displayed to us at the very end of this episode, and we see in the next episode as well, is that Crazy 8's car was left at the scene. And we really can understand that Walt and Jesse really probably, I mean, maybe they forgot about the fact that Crazy 8's car was there, or maybe they thought to themselves, there's really nothing we can do to get that car out of there. And, there's no real connection to us. And I kind of think back a little bit to when Mike's car was destroyed after Walt shot him in the episode entitled Say My Name. And of course, we then learn, based on Walt's conversation with Todd in the episode entitled Gliding Overall, where it's heavily implied that Todd drove Mike's car to the Joe's junkyard to be destroyed, as they have done with as they did with the RV in the episode entitled Sunset. Great sort of episode there. But yeah, it's kind of very interesting to sort of see, again, as Saul Goodman absolutely said in the episode entitled Saul Gone, I mean, Walter White was just really in over his head here, absolutely just was not prepared for this contingency whatsoever, and was really flying by the seat of his pants here when trying to clean up this mess for the very first time. And you wonder if all of these permutations and combinations were going through his head. Probably not. He was probably acting maybe a little bit impulsively when he decided to cook methamphetamine following his cancer diagnosis in the previous episode. But like I said, you wonder, I doubt Walt ever planned for a contingency like this, where he effectively had to commit, I mean, I don't know, maybe it was self-defense, but he had to kill two drug dealers essentially to save himself. But like I said, when we finally get to the scene here in the RV, one of the pieces of dialogue that really stood out to me in respect to this partnership was Jesse saying to Walt, "Can't we just leave them here?" And Walt say, "And what? Have someone find them? People have seen us." And it's really crazy here. I was really thinking back to the character of Jesse Pinkman, and this piece of dialogue right here, where Jesse is clearly uncomfortable with the situation, as is Walter White. I mean, they're in a horrible situation. There are two dead bodies, at least believed to be dead bodies, in the back of this RV, and Jesse is not dealing with his emotions whatsoever in a very sort of rational state of mind in terms of body disposal. A little bit of a morbid sort of analogy here, but when he says, "Can't we just dump them here?" I mean, Jesse Pinkman over the course of this series is really a character, and this scene is really sort of setting this up, is not good in any respect in coping with his emotions. He wants instant fix, instant gratification, and he just wants to get away from the situation in a very illogical way, where it's true. Walt is saying, if we just dump them here, someone will find them and people could identify us as being here. They know we have been here, but no one else has seen these two bodies. So again, the gears are really turning for Walter White here clearly, where we have to dispose of these bodies in a manner in which no one will find them. A piece of dialogue which he says to Jesse a little bit later in this episode. But again, it just, over the course of this episode, just the way that Jesse Pinkman is presented to us here, with just someone who cannot deal with his emotions well in whatsoever. I mean, to skip ahead a little bit here, when Jesse finally has to deal with Crazy 8's, with him being very uncomfortable with the situation, and maybe, deservedly so. I mean, I don't know what any of us would do if we had to chemically decompose a body in hydrofluoric acid as part of this, situation that we were in. But of course, that's truly the first time he uses methamphetamine here, and truly a pretty, stark piece of foreshadowing for how Jesse Pinkman will cope with his emotions over the course of this series, where anytime there is real emotional distress with Jesse Pinkman, he is horrible at articulating and dealing with his emotions, and he instead represses them and basically just uses a substance to kind of deal with the emotions that he's feeling. And again, I know he's not the only person on the planet who does this, but it's definitely a sort of moniker that is sort of by which the creators labeled Jesse Pinkman here in this episode. Just, really, in hindsight, a real piece of foreshadowing here in respect to Jesse Pinkman's character in this scene. I mean, at the silent revolution, that is the $10-80 million question right there in respect to, I know how Jesse Pinkman was, he lived happily ever after in Alaska. But again, I mean, I don't want to skip ahead of myself too much here, but I mean, there's so many times where Jesse says, after the death of Jane, I'm done using my sobriety. This is the way I'm going to live my life. But the first time that this true emotional distress happens to him following the death of Tomas, he immediately reverts back to methamphetamine use. And again, I hope Jesse lives happily ever after. The optimistic in me hopes he lives happily ever after in Alaska, and any time that he has to deal with emotional distress, he won't turn to drugs as he's done throughout his entire life. It's really hard to remain sober, as Jesse Pinkman has displayed to us. But again, you wonder. I mean, you wonder sort of, if any sort of tough situation impacts Jesse when he's in Alaska, if he's ever going to sort of go back to, the coping mechanism that he's used his entire life, which is methamphetamine use. And it's a real good question at the Silent Revolution. I really have wondered that for sure. It's something that I think the creators are sort of displaying to us that, Jesse's a changed man, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like over the course of this series, he had so many opportunities to be this changed man where, following the death of Jane, or that's the big one right there where he says he's sober and he's done using and he's going to turn over a new leaf and he can manufacture methamphetamine without using it. But of course, when push came to shove, when this amalgam of emotions just coursed through his body following the death of Tomas, he went back to the drug use. And the same way when he found out about the poisoning of Brock, same thing. He went immediately to the methamphetamine use. So again, I mean, say what you will about Howard Hamlin, but the way he dealt with his emotions of seeing a therapist, that might be the most healthy way to combat your emotions. Drowning them in a substance is probably not the best way to do it, if we use Jesse Pinkman as a sort of metaphor here. But yeah, at the Silent Revolution, I mean, that's something I'll probably talk about over the course of my reviews of this entire show. But yeah, it's something I've absolutely thought about for sure. So, but yeah, to kind of get ahead of the here, following this little sort of scene that I pointed out here, again, while we then see while this scene eventually culminates with them realizing that Crazy 8 is still alive, another great piece of dialogue here in the scene is where Walt finally says to Jesse, after we're done cleaning up this mess, we will go our separate ways, our paths will never cross, and we will tell this to no one. And in the moment, I really wonder, I think Walter White truly thought that, and it's kind of an interesting thing to sort of, speculate on and ruminate on, because, he initially went about this venture because he was diagnosed with this terminal lung cancer, and he wanted to leave money for his family following his death. But after this, it really seems to me that, at least based on this dialogue, it seems to me that maybe Walt is sort of throwing in the towel here a little bit, and maybe rightfully so in respect to his character at this point in the timeline. Or maybe he just feels that, I think I'm a little bit in over my head here, and I'm going to cut my losses, and I'm going to try to just live my normal life. But of course, as we know, that's definitely not possible. And again, it's sort of a question I found myself asking here. When Walt said that, our paths will never cross, we will tell this to no one, did he really mean that in the moment where he did not want to pursue this venture anymore? And again, over the course of this season, again, following the next episode, sort of jumping ahead here, where eventually the S hits the fan, and he has to basically confide in Skylar everything that happened to him, because all of the lies had finally blew up in his face, and the only way to sort of justify it was to tell Skylar that his irrational behavior was due to his cancer diagnosis that he was hiding from her. And of course, over the course of the next episodes, I think he wants to just fight this sort of urge to manufacture methamphetamine because of, again, likely based on this PTSD. I mean, well, yeah, maybe PTSD, but again, not wanting to go through an experience like this again after what happens. But again, just based on everything that happens over the course of this season, he eventually, goes back to Jesse Pinkman and decides to cook methamphetamine. Again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but again, that's sort of the grand overarching question here where, once we're done cleaning up this mess, I'm done. And again, he said the same thing in the episode entitled Down, following him getting the positive information at the end of the episode entitled 4 Days Out with his cancer diagnosis, where he says to Jesse, sell what we have, then I'm out. And yeah, in the moment, maybe he felt that way. like he, when he initially talked to Gus Fring in season 3 and says that he didn't want to take up his offer. But of course, just based on, the entire premise of why he's doing all this, where he needs to leave money for his family, he always ends up going back to manufacturing methamphetamine. So just sort of an interesting sort of, food for thought here in respect to, again, we can never know what's going on in these characters' minds unless it's outwardly sort of displayed to us what they're thinking in dialogue. But yeah, it's always something I've definitely thought about in this scene right here. But yeah, following this, we then pan to the next morning, and again, the juxtaposition here is just unbelievable. Where again, in the speech that he gives in his classroom about chirality, really sort of just really exemplifies the entire analogy of Walter White's character that's being displayed to us in this episode. But yeah, just it's the juxtaposition here, where after everything that just happened with Walter White, where he cooks crystal meth now and he killed a man and another man is almost dead. But he's just trying to live his normal life, and his family is none the wiser at this point. I mean, I think Skylar knows something is a little bit up as it's displayed to us later in this episode, but just the juxtaposition of him just trying to live his normal life, which he does in this episode, is quite dark here in many respects, where he's trying to go about and live his life, but at the same time, all of this other stuff that he's not confiding in his family right now. The juxtaposition is actually really something to behold here for sure. And at the same time, my goodness gracious, when I first saw this scene, I thought this was absolutely hilarious when, he's having this small talk conversation with his family, but of course it's interrupted by Jesse Pinkman calling, posing as an AT&T long distance salesman. And just unbelievable scene here, hilarious. Just Walter White's reaction to that phone call. Of course, kind of gets the ball rolling here in respect to Walt finally cleaning up this mess with Jesse. Again, also raising Skylar's suspicions here in the scene as well, where she calls back Jesse Pinkman's number following Walt pretending that he doesn't know the person who's calling, doing the star 67 trick, I believe. And we hear Jesse Pinkman's notorious answering machine of 148, 3 to the 3 to the 6 to the 9, representing the ABQ, what up, biatch, leave it at the tone. Unbelievable, sort of, comedic writing that's interjected in this very dark story here. Just absolutely love this scene. Unbelievable. Like I said, the dialogue is one of my favorite aspects of this story. So just something that I was blown away by the dialogue for my 16th rewatch of this episode. But yeah, another great piece of another unbelievable scene here. Just the thematic just writing that was written into the story is just unbelievable. And again, I would have loved to be a sort of well, not actually, but I would have loved to be able to sit in those writers' room and just listen to what, the conversations that were likely happening here. But this speech about chirality, and again, I'm not a sort of science expert, I'm the farthest thing from it, but a sort of great sort of speech here where he talks about chirality sort of meaning, mirror images. And while like your hands may look similar, being that they're mirror images of one another, they're actually very, very different, and they don't act in the same way. And of course, a total analogy here for the character of a Walter White that's going to be presented to us over the course of this series, and just the way the sort of chemistry lessons that are written into these scenes just happen to deal with the character of Walter White that's being presented to us in this episode. Is just unbelievable writing here by the creators. And again, the sort of jump ahead to the episode entitled Crazy Handful of Nothing, the same time the sort of science lesson that he gives in that episode in his classroom directly deals with the fulminated mercury scene, the little tweak of science that is ultimately the climax of that episode. So I really love how the creators wrote in these sort of science lessons to really just exemplify the sort of way they want to present Walter White's character in the episode in which it was written. Just unbelievable scene here, absolutely, in respect to the speech about chirality. But at the same time, another great scene here as well, where while Walt is trying to live his normal life, and like I talked about a little bit earlier, where he says, our paths will never cross, we will tell us to no one. Maybe in his head he's thinking, maybe I can get out of this somehow. But the speech, the question that a student asked to him, is this going to be on the murder, which Walt, is very taken aback by, but of course it's revealed to us that he misheard his student here, and he actually said midterm. Again, really sort of, displaying, yes, exactly, at Lewis A9, is this going to be on the murder? Really sort of explaining to us that the sort of you can't so what's the, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. What happened with Walter White is forever going to affect him, and while he maybe hopes that he can somehow go back to living his normal life, at least that's sort of my reading in the very beginning of the scene. We just know based on this dialogue. Yeah, spoiler alert at Joe Gossett. Thank you very much for that. But yeah, we just know that, like I said, you can't put the eggshell back together once it's broken. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube here, and this event here is forever impacting Walter White, and as we will obviously see over the course of this series, truly foreshadowing what is to come in this unbelievable story here of this high school chemistry teacher who manufactures methamphetamine to leave to his money to make money for his family. Excuse me, sort of stumbled on my words there. Got distracted by the chat. But yeah, great scene here. Again, the juxtaposition of him just teaching class, being with his students, teaching his students this very sort of basic chemistry premise. Immediately juxtaposed. Again, do I use that word too often? Again, I should have paid more attention in high school English class. I shouldn't have, not paid attention. Maybe I know another synonym for that word. But again, immediately contrasted, I guess, to this scene here where we see Walter White going into his, I guess what he calls the science storage units. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what you would call this. The sort of chemistry storage area. And he gets these big vats of hydrofluoric acid to, again, at the time, we didn't exactly know what the premise was here. I don't know if anyone sort of knew it in the moment, but again, it's crazy where after teaching his students, he now has to steal this hydrofluoric acid in order to chemically decompose a man that he murdered in order to cover up his tracks in order to save himself. So yeah, just unbelievable scene here, absolutely. Like I said, we then sort of see more of the relationship between Walt and Jesse here, where following this, we then see Crazy 8 escape from the RV. Unbelievable scene here again. Just the amount of, again, it's so sort of, again, I don't even really know how to explain this, but again, this scene is so dark, yet at the same time, it's just unbelievably funny here, where you have this man who was almost murdered. We see this sort of Mr. Chips character who's in over his head, trying to deal with this situation, trying to corral this man into his car. We then see sort of Crazy 8's beeline, completely just make a run for it because he is, he clearly knows who this is, I suppose. I mean, I don't know, maybe he's acting irrationally here, but when he runs into that tree and Walt, places him in this car, again, this is just an unbelievable scene here. I mean, again, I'm going to run out of superlatives to, the Bravo Vince meme here, but the way this scene was just written, just unbelievably dark and funny at the same time. So it's, at BCS 1980, the part is so funny, it's wrong, LOL. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's unbelievably how, again, the dark nature and the humor of the scene is just, again, as I'm watching this for the very first time, kind of going back to 2012, I mean, just absolutely sold on this show, absolutely. I mean, my goodness, I mean, you had me at the pants flying through the air with the benefit of hindsight, but my goodness, this was a great scene here, absolutely. So, I mean, hilarious. Even just the sort of elevator music that's overlaid in the scene. Of course, I can't play it for, copyright purposes, but yeah, just a grand slam scene right here. Absolutely hilarious. At the same time, we see in the next scene the sort of ball rolling here for Skylar becoming more suspicious of Walter White. And again, to sort of look at the sort of thematic elements of the scene here, I mean, it's kind of crazy. I mean, to kind of think about what's going on in Skylar's head, I mean, just the man that she had been married to for, I don't know, probably a decade or more, and this sort of Mr. Chips character who never did a sort of bad thing in his life and really was not a risk taker and was very sort of almost milquetoast and unpredictable and reserved and not a lot of excitement here. I mean, you can only imagine clearly Skylar is too intelligent of a character and it's not completely oblivious to the behavior that Walt has been exhibiting over the course of this episode and the previous episode. And when she does the sort of star 67 here and looks up the My Shout page of Jesse Pinkman, we can really sort of see the ball rolling here of Skylar saying, what is going on here? Is this a midlife crisis? I mean, what is going on with my husband right now? Something is not right. I mean, she's not completely oblivious where she's all this is just gonna go over her head. And of course, the final confrontation that happens at the end of this episode when she's getting the sonogram at the doctor's office really sort of exemplifies that. But yeah, really sort of displaying to us much more depth here in respect to Skylar's character, and sort of displaying to us more of the backstory of this relationship that we're going to see over the course of this series. At Stone Yoda, that is a good point in respect to that flashback scene, I believe, to the episode entitled "Full Measure." Right, the cold opening scene of that episode, where we see Walt with the sports car and buying the house and having these sort of big dreams. But that was prior to her being pregnant with Walter Jr., I think. But again, it's sort of once he sort of became this sort of family man, this father figure. At some point, I mean, I would say what that was at least. That was at least what, I mean, Walter Jr. is what, 15 years old here in this scene. So for the last at least 15 years of marriage, I would say Walt was this sort of milquetoast reserved character. And yes, he wasn't like that his entire life. Again, we don't know too much about his early life, but that scene there when he was driving that sports car, when he was very sort of confident in respect to thinking that it was sort of a starter home, and why would they buy this home when they're just going to have to upgrade in a little bit. But again, following Walter Jr. being born, the sort of the last decade and a half was really just the same old for Walt and Skylar. And again, this behavior is quite different from what she's been used to seeing over the course of the last decade and a half. So you can definitely understand why Skylar is suspicious here for sure. But yeah, following this, just great. Again, the dialogue here, just the dialogue here where Walt and Jesse are talking about Crazy 8, and where we're learning a little bit about Jesse's knowledge of sort of and his history of the Albuquerque criminal underworld, with telling us more about this character Crazy 8. But yeah, just absolutely, again, the dialogue here just absolutely unbelievable. And again, the sort of more of the same sort of thematically here, where Jesse is absolutely in over his head, doesn't know what to do here in respect to these two bodies, completely deferring to again, actually, to get ahead a little bit, that's a little bit ahead of myself here. We kind of learn more. This scene more is about just us displaying to us the sort of backstory of this character Crazy 8, and Jesse Pinkman's sort of backstory in the Albuquerque criminal underworld. And yeah, exactly. While we know how Crazy 8 got his name, Walt and Jesse never did. They never did get that story about that card game that he played with Halal Salamanca. And yeah, it's kind of crazy to think in hindsight. I talked a little bit about this yesterday at Richie MC of my review of the pilot episode, where Crazy 8 lived about 4 years following the death of Lalo Salamanca, and just based on the sort of home that he was living and based on the fact that he was likely a higher ranking member in the cartel, he probably lived a very good life in the cartel for those almost half decade there. But of course, it's success in the Albuquerque criminal underworld, especially in the cartel, can be very fleeting. And as Don Eladio said to Nacho Varga in the episode entitled Something Unforgivable, you don't want to be looking over your shoulder. You're in the wrong business, my friend. So again, the lifespan for these characters it's clearly not very long for the people who work in the sort of the cartel game, if you will. But yeah, kind of really sort of interesting to see sort of more of Jesse Pinkman's sort of backstory and his role in the Albuquerque criminal underworld. Again, thematically displaying to us how, kind of it's really a partnership here, where Walt has information that Jesse needs in respect to the science of how to get out of this situation, and Walt sort of needs this information on how to get involved in this world where I can sell this methamphetamine, where yes, I can manufacture it. But again, as he talked about in the episode, I believe entitled Mandela, where Saul says to him, why the long faces? You're sitting on a gold mine, a gold mine we can't sell. And again, it's so true. I mean, Walt could just, be in that RV making pounds and pounds of meth, but what good is money that doesn't spend? So yeah, more of just displaying to us the partnership of this backstory. Of course, it's then revealed to us that Crazy 8 is starting to begin, sort of regain more consciousness here. They have to put the motorcycle. Yes, exactly. Is he capable of listening? Great piece of dialogue there at Stone Yoda. Is he capable of listening to reason? Again, as he was saying to him, he's a man of business. Therefore, it would make sense that he would be capable of acting in mutual self-interest. Of course, that goes way over Jesse's head, and he has to, dumb it down, if you will, a little bit. But yeah, just great scene here, which sort of gets the ball rolling. And like I said, following them finally putting that bike lock on Crazy Eight's neck, we then see again, like I said, the thematic element of Walter White's sort of expertise in this partnership, because that's really what it was. It really was a 50-50 partnership where Walt said, truly, they are in this 50-50. They truly are. And of course, we then sort of see the ball rolling here again. Unbelievable piece of dialogue in respect to Walt understanding the gravity of the situation, where he says, the Crazy Eight situation is not even the situation that is of most concern. We have a body in that RV and it's getting warmer. Do you understand that? And now we have to dispose of it of a way in which no one will ever find it. And that last part is very, very important. And again, I think Walt is truly aware of this, but with Jesse Pinkman again being this very sort of emotional character, which is true, not truly thinking about just the gravity of how one would dispose of a body. So again, it's true. I think they truly, without each other, would not have been able to thrive and what's the word I'm looking, flourish in the way that they did over the course of this series. And of course, Walt is the one who uses the science to tell Jesse that they need to decompose of Crazy Eight's body chemically with hydrofluoric acid. Kind of an interesting sort of side note here, where I don't know if anyone here has seen the Mythbusters episode where they sort of, busted that myth where you can't truly chemically disincorporate a body with hydrofluoric acid. They put, I think, rocks and other materials in a bathtub, and it didn't eat through the porcelain as it did at the end of this episode. It didn't disintegrate the rocks like it would do at the end of this episode. It wouldn't even disintegrate a pig carcass, which is sort of very similar to at least used scientifically because of its similarity to a human carcass. But yeah, I've definitely talked about that for sure, about how while the science of that doesn't really hold water, it is kind of interesting though, where that is truly the chemically the chemical, I stumble over this term, the chemical disincorporation of a body with hydrofluoric acid was truly a literary vessel that was used again and again and again over the course of the series in order to drive the plot forward. So yeah, it was absolutely a myth that you can't actually do that. You actually have to add some sort of extra special chemical that they didn't say on the episode of Mythbusters, because as they said, they didn't want to tell people how to dispose of bodies. But yeah, so it is kind of interesting to think about how the science of that does not work. Even if you use lots and lots of hydrofluoric acid, it won't dissolve a body in the manner it does on screen. At the same time, it was absolutely a literary vessel which they needed to use to drive the plot forward. And yes, while I'm not too sure about the fulminated mercury. I think it would explode, but not in the manner by which it was displayed to us on screen, and that was kind of a one-off thing. But with the hydrofluoric acid, again, that was a staple literary vessel device which was used in this story for sure. So just kind of interesting food for thought there. Again, it doesn't ruin the show for me whatsoever. I mean, it could have easily been written in where Walt needed this. I think Walt would clearly have known about this sort of extra chemical that you would need to chemically disincorporate a body. I mean, he's just an unbelievable scientific genius, and I think that mystery chemical that they added in Mythbusters, I think a character like Walter White would absolutely know about that. So while they maybe wrote it and so they didn't actually want people to know how to dispose of bodies, I don't think that's truly a sort of plot hole, or it doesn't ruin it whatsoever for me, because I truly believe that a character like Walter White would absolutely know how to do that. So yeah, just kind of an interesting scene here. And yeah, following this, following us really, finally seeing where this plot is finally going to go. Exactly, at the Stone Yoda. Exactly. They didn't want it to be a how-to. Exactly. Absolutely right. That's sort of my reading of it completely. But yeah, following the sort of us finally getting here to it being displayed to us of what happens next to Emilio's body. The sort of main theme of the second half of this episode is truly, again, I don't even know how you would say it. It's kind of this sort of I don't even know, just sort of the ambiguity of morality a little bit, which I feel is a common theme over the course of the series, where, of course, when push comes to shove and Walt basically says, I think the fair way to go about this is someone should deal with Crazy Eight and someone should deal with Emilio. But, of course, when push comes to shove, neither character wants to kill another man just, in cold blood. I mean, you could definitely argue that I mean, you could maybe argue a little bit more that the murder of Emilio was self-defense, but the murder that, again, the murder that he eventually commits in the next episode in the bags in the river, that you could definitely argue self-defense as well. But in this moment right here, neither character wants to commit first degree sort of premeditated murder, and they would rather sort of dispose of a body rather than kill someone. And again, the sort of, I guess, how would you sort of the sort of how, what's the word I'm looking for here, just the sort of again, I want to say juxtaposition again, but the sort of, again, juxtaposition or the contrast of who this character is right now, who just sort of dipped his toe into the Albuquerque criminal underworld, and who he will eventually come, where he will kill 11 witnesses in cold blood to save himself, in the episode entitled Gliding Overall. And it really sort of goes to, what Vince Gilligan talked about how, and, I've heard Bryan Cranston talk about this as well in interviews when he would talk about Breaking Bad, but just the way that a character like Walter White, who never did a sort of bad thing in his entire life, can eventually just, slowly dip his toe into these, criminal waters where, yes, he's doing these little by little. He's manufacturing methamphetamine. He's disposing of bodies. Eventually, he sort of, he begins to kill more and more and more. The first couple of times, you can kind of argue self-defense with Emilio and Crazy 8 and Tuco. But again, over the course of this series, it eventually divulges into first-degree murder. It devolves into, poisoning a child is just a move, to quote Jesse Pinkman. So yes, the real sort of slippery slope here in respect to sort of morality and one's sort of perception of it, and just the ability of a character like Walter White, who was a completely normal human being, who was a normal in air quotes, but just a functioning member of society, who was just an upstanding citizen, who kind of never really did a bad thing in his life. Probably wasn't the type of guy who'd even take a penny off the sidewalk, maybe. Or would steal a penny from someone, who will eventually just do all these terrible things over the course of this series. And just the way, the sort of just how gradual it can become, and just the sort of metaphor how I really feel that, maybe really any person can sort of, when push comes to shove of this, life-changing, life-altering event, where your life can truly change on a dime like this. It's crazy what human beings are capable of doing, even ones that are like Walter White, and even ones who would say, oh, this person could never do something like this in their entire life. But yeah, just the metaphor for all of this is just absolutely unbelievable here, where we see this first scene here where neither person wants to deal with killing Crazy 8, but eventually, I mean, the irony of all of it, of what this character Walter White is eventually doing at the end of the series, is just truly remarkable and unbelievable, and one of the reasons why I just absolutely love the writing of this story. Absolutely. But yeah, again, great sort of, more, we see more of this over the course of this episode. Again, we see Walt just sort of contemplating the fact that following the sort of coin flip here, the, him himself saying, I suppose it's not bad for him just to flip a coin in this circumstance. But again, just really sort of, again, the scene here it really kind of goes back to what I just talked about how truly he's not able at this point in time to just commit murder in cold blood. And, again, at the same time, we have the subplot here of the polyethylene plastic container, kind of again displaying to us the ignorance of Jesse Pinkman, if you will, and sort of him, the sort of in terms of the rational thinking and the science is way over his head at this point in time. In the same way, the sort of cold-blooded murder of the Albuquerque criminal underworld is just way over the head of Walter White at this point in time. And again, Jesse Pinkman here, great scene here where he's again the sort of displaying to us the sort of ambiguity of morality, where he tries to help Walter White through this process by telling him, try to think of it as just doing him a favor here. So again, just the sort of the way the sort of layers here are displayed to us of this entire story of Walter White just grappling with this task that he has to unfold is just unbelievable, in my opinion. Just, oh my goodness gracious, I love this episode so much. But yeah, again, the contrast here of this, what again, it's unbelievable to think I mean, you wonder even what's going through Walter White's mind here. Maybe he's sort of not, I don't know if he's being too retrospective here or truly, having this sort of epiphany here where, what is my life coming to here? Just a couple of days ago, I was just a high school chemistry teacher and was just living my life. And now I'm sort of going about the best way by which to kill a incapacitated man. Do I stab him? Do I hit him with a hammer? Do I shoot him? What do I do here? I mean, how do I kill this man? Of course, him using his science, he eventually stumbles on the plastic bag suffocation technique, which would probably be the most. Again, I don't know if it's the most humane way. I mean, I feel like it would be way more painful than a very swift sort of coup de grace between the eyes. Not to be too blunt here, but again, this is more done for Walter White's benefit as opposed to the benefit of the person who is being executed. But of course, when push comes to shove, while I think, yes, he was planning on putting this plastic bag on Crazy 8's head, again, when he wakes up and he sees this is another human being, despite the fact that, as Jesse Pinkman said to him earlier, if I let him go, Jesse Pinkman's like says to him, "What do you think? He'll be this rational character who won't, come back and kill your entire family." So again, it's just he's between a absolute rock and a hard place here. And again, the dark nature that the way of the scene, that the way it's written, where yes, he was literally about to kill this man who he thought was incapacitated, but of course, following this, where he knows that he's still alive and that he's dehydrated and thirsty here. This is then immediately, again, in a sort of grand irony here, he just went from literally about to kill this man to then, making him food and giving him water. So again, just again, it really sort of displays to us again, the vast contrast of who this character was and who he eventually becomes, where, he is, I really don't think, how do I put this? I mean, at this point at this point in time for Walter White's character, it really wasn't, very difficult for him to humanize a character like Crazy Eight. It really wasn't, and it was very easy for him, and it's sort of where his mind went to initially. But again, to kind of go back to that analogy I made a little bit earlier, when he killed the witnesses in jail, those were also people just the same as Crazy Eight, with backstories and with families. And he learns a little bit about Crazy Eight's backstory in the next episode with Tampico Furniture. But at that time, Walt didn't think about any of that. He couldn't think about any of that. It was more just about protecting himself. And he really had to sort of remove those just intrinsic tendencies of humanizing human beings during his process here, when he's becoming this meth overlord. Is that the right overlord? Is that the right word? Just meth drug lord? I don't even know what the right terminology is here. But yeah, just the way he humanizes Crazy Eight. But of course, those jail killings, he doesn't care about that. It's all just about serving his own interest. I mean, Heisenberg, given this circumstance, would absolutely just have killed Crazy Eight with impunity here, and not thought, not giving it a second thought here. So again, I love just seeing the juxtaposition here of who Walter White is now and who he will eventually become. I mean, that's sort of the way I sum up this episode of a Walter White for sure, at least with the benefit of hindsight here. So. And yeah, absolutely. The Lewis A9, that's a great scene here with, it's true, Walter White started to cut off the crust of his bread here. That's a whole nother psychological sort of analysis there. I am not, well versed enough in human psychology to speak on that. So, yeah, it's unbelievable for sure. And yeah, again, the sort of, again, more humanizing him for sure. Crazy Eight with him ripping the crust off his bread, likely a sort of callback to his childhood or something to that effect. And something that he did not do later in this series, when he would just, only think about himself and would not humanize all of the people he was killing, and really kind of, did it a little bit more like Lala Salamanca as opposed to how we did it right now. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Stone Yoda. I have noticed that as well. He sort of takes on the traits of his murders. Again, I cannot even begin to speak on the human psychology of that. I'm not well versed in that enough. I am nowhere near an expert on to sort of explain away the sort of mental rationale on why he would do that. But yeah, that is really a good point for sure at Stone Yoda. But yeah, again, another great scene here with Walt here, where he again. I remember when I sort of watched this scene over and over again. The sort of grand question I have here when he smokes cannabis for the first time is that I think it's heavily implied based on this dialogue where Skyler later confronts him about it in the doctor's office, where he says, "I kind of liked it." I really think that while it's not 100% cut and dry, I really think that this is the very first time that Walter White ever used cannabis in his entire life. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting scene here for sure. I actually made an entire video about this actually a long time ago in respect to analyzing the scene here of Walt smoking cannabis for the first time. Kind of an interesting scene here where, just based on his lack of ability to roll this cigarette here, I think he's very not well versed in this world whatsoever. But of course, he eventually, after trial and error, figures out how to do it, as all people who use this eventually do. And yeah, it was kind of just a very interesting scene here. Again, I talked about it more at length in an entire video, but again, it's kind of just interesting here where Walt is really sort of just living in the moment here, really just sort of enjoying a brief momentary moment of bliss here. Clearly, the first time he ever used this, again, he talks about Skyler. He kind of likes it. He likes the effects of this substance that he's using. And yeah, at Spalsura, that's a really sort of that's a great sort of point right there. And I was thinking about there's so much sort of nuance here in respect to that dialogue, but I think back to, when Jesse Pinkman eventually sees him, he's very taken aback by it and says, are you smoking weed, quote unquote? Just in his mind, just thinking this is just unbelievable. Like, what is this sort of an alternate reality? What is happening right now? The nerdiest old dude I know, giant stick up his ass, this sort of nerdy chemistry teacher that I knew back in high school who would probably, I could never in a million years picture doing something like this, is smoking this substance in my house right now. Again, Jesse's mind is in many ways blown, but of course, yes, the joke there is where he's initially amused by it, but when he finds out that it's his product, he is a little bit less amused for sure at Pulsura. Make yourself at home, why don't you? So yeah, just unbelievable scene here for sure. And again, in the sort of context of all this, just thinking thematically, I was kind of thinking back about this. I mean, back when this scene takes place in the year 2008, it is actually kind of true. I mean, nowadays, I mean, cannabis use is just way more socially acceptable now than it was like 14 years ago. It's amazing just how much society has changed in respect to its legality in many states. But back in '08, it was way more taboo and was, again, while people were obviously using it, it was much less open and people wouldn't really talk about it. And, but yeah, I definitely think the sort of context of that, this being 2008, sort of makes Jesse maybe more surprised by all this. Maybe if it was 2022, he'd be a little bit less surprised, where it's much more ubiquitous now. Again, it's not legal in every state. It's not, it's not federally legal, but yeah, I also sort of thought about that, the sort of context of this scene taking place in 2008, and just it's amazing how much society can change, overnight sometimes. Where again, something like sports gambling was much more taboo and was I think was illegal in every state except for Nevada. But nowadays, my goodness, it's unbelievably ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's advertised everywhere on local news, on all these even sort of, family-friendly content. They advertise sports gambling. So it's amazing how quickly society can change on a dime like that, where before it was so taboo and was, really wasn't talked about. And you definitely couldn't advertise it on a lot of mediums that are consumed by families and things of that nature. But yeah, just kind of an interesting scene here for sure. I break it down more in a previous video, but... But yes, Jesse is a user of all substances. He uses nicotine, he uses alcohol, he uses cannabis, he uses amphetamines. So yes, he uses all sorts of substances, as many people do. So yeah, great scene here. Again, more just exemplifying the thematic effect of, Jesse not buying a polyethylene container because he thinks, as he says, there wasn't a container that can fit an entire body. Again, it's then revealed to us in the big payoff later in this episode that this was a grave error by Jesse Pinkman, and quite the overlook here where the consequences of his bad decision sort of bite him in the ass tenfold at the end of this episode. But of course, at the same time, Walt has to leave the situation very abruptly because he has to go to his doctor's appointment with Skylar. And again, a very sort of dark piece of dialogue here in respect to, Walt being very taken aback and very happy by the fact that he is a girl and saying he always wanted Skylar's baby to be a girl. But, Skylar says that very sort of sobering piece of dialogue where she says to him, I'll remind you that you said that you wanted her to be a girl when she's 16 and starts dating. Again, the sort of, classic trope of, a father being protective of his teenage daughter. But of course, the look on Walter White's face, if I can find it here, just the, with him not having been completely open with Skylar, the fact that, he has terminal lung cancer and he absolutely, all statistics say that he will not live another 16 years. Maybe he'll live another couple years or 5 years or something to that effect, but he's not going to be able to see his daughter grow up here. So a very sort of sobering piece of dialogue. And again, while Walt sort of said that he wanted to, at least heavily implied that he wanted to get back and live a sort of normal life, his predicament being what it is, while he maybe after that first experience with Crazy 8 and Emilio just didn't want to do this anymore. That was a sort of gut initial visceral reaction. The sort of circumstances of his life here that are again sort of foreshadowed are, display to us why he ends up doing what he does at the over the course of this first season and over the course of this series. And again, like I talked about a little bit earlier in respect to Skylar looking at Jesse Pinkman's page here and the sort of context of her husband acting out for basically the first time in their marriage since Walter Jr. was born. We then finally see the confrontation here where Skylar says, who is this Jesse Pinkman to you? He called the house. You've been acting erratically. What is going on? I want you to tell me the truth. But of course, with Walt not being ready to tell her the full truth yet, tells yet another lie. And I know that it was really kind of cool when it was displayed to us in the cold opening scene of the episode entitled Ozymandias, where that was revealed to us to be the very first lie that Walter White would ever eventually tell to Skylar as a part of this, undertaking that he would have to manufacture methamphetamine. But yeah, we really started to see the ball rolling here in respect to all of the lies that Walter White will tell, where instead of him coming clean, as he says to Jesse Pinkman later in this episode, when he says to, him, why did you tell your wife that I was selling you weed? Because it seemed preferable to, telling her that I cooked crystal meth and killed a man. So yeah, just Walter White kind of being the person who just, again, over the course of the series will lie and tell half-truths in order to benefit himself, in order to sort of concoct and fabricate the life that he wants his family to lead, in conjunction with his decision-making to manufacture methamphetamine. And of course, it eventually all blows up in his face in the episode entitled ABQ at the end of season 2 of Breaking Bad, where Skylar basically kicks him out of the house. But yeah, just again, another sort of lie here. And again, a great scene here where again, Walt tells Skylar to climb on down out of his ass. I would really appreciate it. Again, like I talked about, for the first time probably in a decade and a half, acting out in this manner. More just exemplifying to us the sort of change in personality that Walter White is slowly and gradually undertaking over the course of this series. And yeah, just an unbelievable great scene here for sure. I absolutely loved it. And again, great scene after great scene after great scene, absolutely. And again, kind of another really interesting scene here where we see again, I'm not I wish I was a sort of expert on human psychology here, but I'm absolutely not. Again, I'm going to try to find the exact frame here. It might be a little tough to find the exact frame. But yeah, basically when we hear, Walt just shout out in the classroom, stop. Again, you wonder if he's sort of having these maybe bad thoughts in his head or something to that effect, and he's just thinking about everything that's going on when he yells out stop. So you just wonder what he's thinking about in his head. Of course, he then composes himself and says stop in 15 minutes. Of course, with his mind being absolutely preoccupied with what's going on with Jesse Pinkman and Crazy 8 and Emilio. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting scene here where Walt sort of shouts out, stop. And I always wondered what was going on through his head. Was he thinking these sort of bad thoughts in his head, or was he having these sort of compulsive bad thoughts or something to that effect? And, he was literally he articulated out loud, like, stop something, stop thinking about them, stop, I don't know what. So again, we'll never know, we'll never go what's going on in Walter White's head. But yeah, it's a great scene here for sure, absolutely. I absolutely loved it. The scene here with Walt. And, again, we'll never know what was going on in his head. It will truly be up to us. Again, it's kind of what I alluded to there in respect to, probably having these bad thoughts in his head. But yeah, again, this is then juxtaposed with, like I talked about earlier in this stream, about how Jesse Pinkman dealt with his emotional distress using methamphetamine. It is absolutely his go-to. He's horrible at articulating his emotions. He's clearly overcome with negative effects. And again, I glossed over a little bit of the plot that happened here in this episode, but yeah, well, has lots of moments of thought in the classroom. Absolutely at Lewis A6. But just when he blurted out "stop," I clearly, in my opinion, I think he was literally trying to stop the thoughts in his head or something to that effect. That's sort of my interpretation of that scene. But yeah, to kind of, I sort of skipped over a little bit of the dialogue here. But after Walter White leaves and he tells Jesse that Crazy 8 is still alive in the basement, he says, stay away from him. He's awake. And this scene here, when he finally let's just say, when he finally disposes of Emilio's body, was the very next day. And I always wondered to myself, was Jesse Pinkman even able to sleep in that house that night? I mean, with this man tied up in his basement and with him being all paranoid, you even wonder if he was even able to sleep that night. I mean, I don't think I would be able to sleep in that circumstance. Maybe being afraid that Crazy 8 would somehow get away and maybe kill him or something to that effect. So I would imagine that this amphetamine use was likely compounded by the fact that Jesse Pinkman probably hadn't slept in a very long time. Again, that's sort of my reading of the scene. Maybe he did sleep. I couldn't see him sort of sleeping in that house with a Crazy 8 chained up in the basement. But yes, he has to undergo this task at Stone Yoda. He probably didn't sleep because he was on that high. Yeah, I agree completely. I think he had been up for hours, probably up for over 24 hours, probably, maybe even longer, using amphetamines, acting irrationally. And yeah, keeps him up for days for sure. I definitely don't think he was able to sleep that night. No way. I don't think Jesse Pinkman slept that night. But of course, he eventually uses the methamphetamine to sort of, pump himself up to finally decompose Emilio's body. He says it's just a bunch of meat. Again, great scene here when he's confronted by Skylar, where Skylar, again, in respect, I know Paul Sura is not the biggest fan of the sort of Skylar plot that's going on here for sure. But again, the sort of tie a bow on the Skylar plot here. She's trying to just nip this in the bud. She's seeing the irrational behavior by Walt. She's saying, okay, he's having a midlife crisis. He's using marijuana. I really don't understand it, but maybe this is just it. I can confront his drug dealer, and I can just sort of nip this situation in the bud. That's sort of the way I sort of see her decision making here in this episode, where she confronts Jesse. She tries to just get Walter White to stop this bad behavior. Of course, she'll confide in Marie in respect to her husband using cannabis. Of course, Marie misconstrues it, and that's a whole nother amazing sort of subplot that happens with Walter Jr. and Hank. But yeah, that's sort of my reading here of Skylar's scene here for sure, trying to just, Walt is acting out. I'm going to try to fix this in the way I can. I'm going to threaten him, I think she's being somewhat sincere in respect to, if a push came to shove, maybe she would tell Hank about all this, but I'm giving you a fair warning. I don't want you to get in trouble. I don't want my husband to get in trouble. Of course, if she did tell Hank, I guess Walt by definition would have to get in trouble, I suppose. I don't know. But yeah, that's sort of the way Skylar is sort of handling this situation here, and is trying to just sort of navigate what's going on in her life right now. And again, I can understand how she's, feeling this way. I mean, she's pregnant, for goodness sake. I mean, her husband is acting emotionally, very irrationally. So I can understand where Skylar is coming from here. I really can. I know, again, I don't know if Skylar's my favorite character by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't hate her by any stretch either. So that's sort of my interpretation here. Of course, it's also done in the context of she just happens to show up when Jesse was moving Emilio's body, sort of raising the sort of heightened tension here in this scene. Yeah, great piece of dialogue there. I'm Skylar White, yo. Great piece of dialogue for sure at X Ada Bood. But yeah, following Jesse almost getting caught, he then very irrationally and very, I guess, unintelligently, that's Zone Yoda, very unintelligently decides to chemically disincorporate Emilio's body along with the guns in his bathtub, doing exactly what Walt told him not to do. Again, probably wasn't thinking again, it's true. When he asked him in the hardware store, like, why do I have to buy this plastic container? Again, Walt didn't tell him, basically saying, you otherwise, clowned off or jerked off or right, something like that in every single one of my chemistry lessons. In every single one of my classes, as far as I'm concerned, your chemistry lesson is over. Again, Walt maybe not realizing the gravity of the impulsive behavior of his partner right here, and of course, I think he knew if he knew what Jesse would do, he would absolutely probably have told him why you need to buy this container. Instead, as he says in the very next episode, what that obscenity that I spent the last 2 to 3 hours cleaning up, that is your contribution. So yeah, just great scene here, just showing us more of the impulsive, emotional, erratic behavior of Jesse Pinkman. We then see this unbelievable confrontation here where, Walt then says, is that what I think I smell? And Jesse's saying, my house, my rules. And again, displaying to us the dynamic between these two characters that will be displayed to us over the course of this series. The very impulsive behavior of Jesse Pinkman and the sort of more calculated, intelligent behavior of Walter White. Of course, at the same time, oh yes, of course. Sorry, my got a little bit distracted there, but yeah, the great piece of dialogue in the next episode. Absolutely, Stone Yoda getting ahead of ourselves here, but yeah, just as following this confrontation here again. At the same time, Jesse says to him, "You have a brother-in-law in the DEA," telling Walt about the scene that happened with Skyler. Really sort of setting up where the end of the story goes. Walt saying that he was, he basically saying he's not my brother, he's a brother-in-law. At the same time, sorry, excuse me. But yeah, great scene here for sure. And again, Jesse's sort of also confused about why he told him this lie. And the premise here again, great piece of dialogue when Walt says because I thought it was preferable to telling her that I cooked crystal meth and killed a man. Again, as I talked about a little bit earlier, just Walt using these lies to sort of contour and craft the sort of reality that he wants to pretend that his family is living in. And of course, the climax of all of this where Jesse then says to him, you haven't done your part. I already did my part. Walt, of course, saying this is a truly bad job, the premeditated murder. And of course, Jesse in his very, I don't even know what the right word is, but Jesse being peak Jesse saying, and why do you have me driving around town for this stupid plastic container when I have this perfectly good tub I can use? Again, just truly exemplifying Jesse's persona and personality here. And my goodness, that look that Walt gives, again, it'd be hard to sort of find the exact frame here, but again, I don't know if I can find the exact frame. But yeah, the sort of look of absolute horror here on Walter White's face, where he is saying, "Did you just say what I thought you just said? You dumped hydrofluoric acid in your bathtub to melt this body." Again, just the look of just horror on Walter White's face here. Again, like I talked about a little bit in my stream yesterday, where I kind of saw Hal from Malcolm in the Middle here. It really sort of, I had sort of flashbacks to watching Malcolm in the Middle here, where I still could not see Heisenberg at this point in time in the story. But yeah, just unbelievable where he realizes the gravity of what Jesse did. He then, walks to the corridor and Emilio's decomposed body falls to the floor. Again, quite the cliffhanger here, absolutely. Of course, I think all fans of the show just absolutely could not wait to see, what happens next here. And of course, Walt saying to him, "Oh, yes, that stupid plastic container I asked you to buy. You see, hydrofluoric acid won't melt through plastic, but it will melt through glass, rock, ceramic." Again, I find this scene, it's just unbelievable. There's a decomposed body in the middle of Jesse's hallway, but I'm literally, even now, after seeing this 16 times, I find this scene just absolutely, there's so much humor interjected in this unbelievably dark scene. It's just so well written, in my opinion. I absolutely loved it. And at Stone Yoda, dude, this was one of the foulest things I ever seen on TV. LMAO, yeah. I didn't want to show a freeze frame of the corpse there, but yeah, just absolutely just unreal for sure. I loved all the thematic elements that were displayed to us in this episode. The sort of the beginning of this partnership really unfolding on screen. Us seeing just the like I said, the beginning of the character evolution of these two characters that I talked about over the course of the stream. And of course, we're really left with sort of two cliffhangers here, with one about how they're going to clean up this mess, and two, we then sort of pan to the cook site out in the on the Indian reservation, and we see this young girl play, I guess, put on the mask that Walter White threw after he again and at the beginning of the previous episode. No, excuse me, at the end of the previous episode, following the brush fire. So again, no, actually no, yeah, it was following the brush fire, of course, after he crashed into the ditch and walked out of the RV. And finally, when he wanted to get some oxygen and some breath, he threw it in the distance, not really thinking about the consequences of throwing this respirator. Of course, it will later be revealed to us that the DEA and Hank Schrader will be able to get a label off of the tag, which says that it was from JP Wynn High School, again, driving the plot forward. But yeah, two great cliffhangers here at the end of this episode at Stone Yoda. Breaking Bad are the best cliffhangers of any show I've seen till this day. Unbelievable. Yeah, that's actually one of the biggest regrets I have about binging Breaking Bad, is that I really wish I could have, really reveled in those cliffhangers for a week. I think back to like the cliffhanger in Crawl Space, of the way the camera pans up and Walter White does that laugh in the crawl space where he just seems absolutely effed. His situation seems like there's no hope. And I can only imagine just reveling in that for a week instead of, watching the episode right after that immediately. So, yeah, just unbelievable episode here for sure. I loved all the thematic elements here that I talked about over the course of this season, of this stream, excuse me. And again, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was watching this, I was absolutely sold. I could not wait to see what happens next. I mean, I think it's pretty damn clear in respect to the way I feel about this series. But yeah, I absolutely love this episode. It was one of my favorite of the entire series, and I've seen it again and again and again. So yeah, I agree. At BCS 1980, yeah, cliffhangers were just unbelievable. But yeah, again, like I talked about, this was just an unbelievable episode. I really found these first three episodes to truly be really operatic. Like Michael Mandow discussed his story, the storyline of Nacho Varga in season 6 of Better Call Saul. It's really quite the story. These first three episodes, which really sort of set up the initial stages of Walter White in the Albuquerque criminal underworld that eventually all end when he has to tell Skyler the truth, a version of the truth when everything starts to blow up in his face in the next episode. But yeah, I absolutely love this episode. I've seen it again and again and again. Again, this first season is just one of my absolute favorites for sure. And yeah, I love everything about this episode. I love the dark humor that was interjected. I love the dialogue. I love the story writing. I love the sort of cliffhangers that were displayed to us at the end of this episode. And yeah, like I said, I feel like I'm kind of running out of superlatives to give to this episode for sure. I agree at Stone Yoda. Even waiting a week, it's pretty brutal. Again, it's sort of it is brutal, but it's all. I mean, yeah, a year long cliffhanger is pretty brutal for sure. But the week to week cliffhanger, I actually kind of like. Where yes, it is a long time, but I do like sort of reveling in it and ruminating on it for the full week. I mean, at the same time, there's a lot to be said about the why binge watching is so great. But I also like to. I also really enjoyed I also really enjoyed reveling in that week. So, but yeah, yeah. I mean, there's pros and cons to both for sure. But yeah, with all that being said, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. But yeah, I really enjoyed discussing this episode. Like I said, I could talk about this show forever and ever and ever. I really like doing these streams. I really like this sort of format. I really like interacting with the chat. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone who tuned in and watched this for sure. Also, if you watch this a little bit later, I appreciate that as well. But yeah, really appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. And again, I'm not sure when I'll do this again. I am planning on doing all of them. I mean, like I said, I really enjoy doing it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'll definitely again, it's not going to be every single day, but I'll definitely sort of post in the community tab when I'm going to talk about another episode. And again, if you want to go along for the ride and watch me talk about this, I'd really appreciate it. And I really appreciate that you enjoy watching. So have a great rest of your night, everyone, and I will see you around. Thanks for tuning in.